Some secrets are buried so deep that the world believes they will never resurface. Yet a single revelation can shatter that illusion in an instant. 3 years ago, the Nord Stream pipeline explosions marked Russia as the villain in the eyes of the West. For months and years, Moscow carried the weight of suspicion while Western media repeated the same narrative. Russia destroys its own infrastructure to pressure Europe. But now, Germany's latest investigation has torn apart that version of events, pointing instead to Ukraine and a covert military operation named Diamant. This discovery is not just about technical evidence or the arrest of one suspect. It is about rewriting the story of Europe's greatest energy crisis in decades, and the timing could not be more volatile. While Berlin uncovers proof that Kyiv's special units orchestrated sabotage, another scandal erupts around the Druzhba oil pipeline, allegedly attacked by Ukrainian drones. Hungary and Slovakia cry out in outrage, accusing their supposed ally of stabbing them in the back. Then comes Donald Trump, who needs only 4 sentences in a personal letter to Viktor Orbán to shake the entire European stage. Anger, disappointment, and a hint of betrayal condensed into a message that cannot be ignored. Suddenly, Ukraine is no longer the untouchable victim, but the subject of doubt and suspicion, caught between friends turning skeptical and enemies gaining ground. This is not only about pipelines or explosions. It is about shifting alliances, broken trust, and the possibility of a geopolitical earthquake that could redraw the entire balance of power. What you are about to witness is a story of hidden motives dragged into the light, of propaganda colliding with reality, and of a continent forced to confront uncomfortable truths it long tried to bury. To understand the magnitude of this revelation, we must return to September 2022, when the Nord Stream pipelines, vital arteries carrying nearly 35% of Europe's natural gas, were suddenly ripped apart by underwater explosions. The shockwaves were not only physical but political. Western governments, from Berlin to Washington, immediately pointed fingers at Moscow. Commentators argued that Russia sought to weaponize its own energy supply, sacrificing billions in infrastructure to intimidate Europe. It became a narrative repeated endlessly. Russia is ruthless. Russia will burn its own house to win the war. Yet, even then, cracks in the logic appeared. Why would Russia destroy a source of leverage, one of its most profitable tools in dealing with Europe? Why would it cripple its own bargaining chip, especially at a time when sanctions and isolation already pressed its economy? Few dared to ask these questions loudly because the dominant story suited political convenience. Now, Germany's investigation has provided what those skeptics long suspected: evidence that the sabotage was not Russian at all, but Ukrainian, conducted with military precision and backed by elite units under intelligence supervision. The arrest of a former security officer, linked to Ukraine's FSB counterpart and elite guard divisions, marks the first concrete breakthrough. Behind him lies a network of 2 soldiers and 4 civilian divers, a small but specialized team capable of carrying out an operation that shook global markets. Berlin's findings suggest that this was not an act of desperation, but of planning at the highest military level, reportedly under the watch of senior Ukrainian generals. If true, it paints a picture of Kyiv not merely defending its soil, but actively engaging in sabotage designed to alter Europe's political choices. For Europe, this revelation is explosive. The Nord Stream sabotage did not simply cut gas flow, it forced the EU into dependency on alternative supplies, particularly American liquefied natural gas. What once was a tight web of interdependence between Russia and Europe became a broken bond, replaced by new ties that locked Europe into transatlantic reliance. The economic cost was enormous. skyrocketing energy bills, industries shutting down, and households shivering through winters. For Russia, the narrative of self-sabotage damaged its reputation. For Ukraine, the possibility of responsibility now threatens to shatter the moral pedestal it has stood on for years. And for the United States, the unintended beneficiary of Europe's energy crisis, uncomfortable questions arise about who truly gained and who truly lost from the destruction of Nord Stream. The revelations did not occur in a vacuum. They struck Europe at a time when solidarity with Ukraine was already showing cracks. Hungary, under Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, had long voiced skepticism about unconditional support for Kyiv. The Druzhba pipeline incident gave him the perfect moment to escalate his warnings. Orbán accused Ukraine of using drones to strike the very infrastructure that supplies Hungary and Slovakia with vital oil. For a country that had provided electricity and fuel to Ukraine in solidarity, this was seen as a betrayal. And then came the response that shocked observers worldwide. Donald Trump, preparing for his historic summit with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, penned a personal letter to Orbán. It contained only 4 sentences, but each carried the weight of thunder. Victor, I do not like hearing this. I am very angry about it. Please tell Slovakia. You are a great friend of mine. These words, brief yet piercing, signaled not only Trump's frustration but also a dramatic shift in tone. For the first time, a leading American voice openly expressed anger at Ukraine's actions rather than unquestioning support. This altered the emotional landscape of transatlantic politics. Suddenly, allies whispered behind closed doors about whether Kyiv had overstepped, about whether continued support was sustainable. Publicly, leaders in Brussels attempted to keep a unified front, but the letter made unity fragile. In Bratislava, in Budapest, and even in Berlin, unease grew louder. Ordinary Europeans, struggling with rising costs of living and exhausted by years of war headlines, began questioning why their governments bore the costs of an ally that might not always act as a victim. Ukraine's image, once shining with moral clarity, was now blurred with shades of suspicion. Meanwhile, Russia seized the opportunity to present itself as rational and even conciliatory. Moscow's peace proposals, acknowledged for the first time by Washington's envoy, cast Putin not as a warmonger but as a pragmatic negotiator. If Ukraine was seen as reckless and Russia as reasonable, then the foundation of Western unity faced unprecedented strain. The Nord Stream and Druzhba sagas thus became more than energy scandals. They turned into mirrors reflecting the true state of Europe's relationships, a continent torn between loyalty, fatigue, anger, and fear of what admitting the truth might mean. As the scandals unfolded, the crisis deepened into something larger than pipelines and letters. The arrest of a Ukrainian officer in connection with the Nord Stream sabotage marked a milestone in Germany's investigation. For years, Berlin had been accused of reluctance, of dragging its feet under pressure from allies who preferred the Russian narrative to remain unquestioned. But now, the evidence was undeniable. Under interrogation, links emerged pointing to a network that was neither rogue nor freelance, but organized and supervised. This was not the work of adventurers, but a mission sanctioned at the highest military levels in Kyiv. Reports even mentioned General Valery Zaluzhny, the then commander-in-chief, as possibly aware of or overseeing aspects of the plan. If proven, it would be the most serious implication of Ukraine in acts of sabotage against European infrastructure. The fallout was immediate. Energy prices, which had stabilized after years of turbulence, began to spike again. Investors panicked, industries braced for further shocks, and European households feared another winter of shortages. Politically, the unity of NATO and the EU began to fracture under strain. Eastern European states, once vocal supporters of Kyiv, hesitated in their commitments. Western capitals struggled to balance sympathy for Ukraine with the anger of their own citizens. And across the Atlantic, Trump's four-sentence letter continued to echo like a warning bell. Washington's special envoy admitted openly that Russia had sent peace proposals, signaling a major departure from the earlier stance that painted Moscow as uninterested in ending the war. For the first time, Russia seemed positioned as the party extending an olive branch, while Ukraine appeared reckless. The narrative shifted, no longer about defending sovereignty alone, but about accountability, trust, and the dangers of proxy warfare. Europe faced a question it had tried to avoid. Had it been supporting not only a victim but also a provocateur? And if so, what did that mean for the billions already spent and the sacrifices already made? This turning point revealed a deeper truth. Wars are not only fought on battlefields, but in the realm of perception. Whoever controls the story controls the alliances. And Germany's findings, combined with Trump's intervention, had just rewritten the script in a way that no one could ignore. Out of crisis often comes the possibility of renewal. And in this turbulent landscape, a new phase of diplomacy began to take shape. In late June, Washington's envoy revealed that the United States was pushing to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict by the close of 2025, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a matter of strategic necessity. For 3 years, the war had drained Ukraine's resilience and battered Russia's economy under sanctions, while Europe staggered under the weight of energy instability and political division. Now, both combatants and their allies were exhausted. Against this backdrop, Moscow's willingness to send peace proposals to Donald Trump appeared less like weakness and more like pragmatism. Putin himself, during the Alaska summit, emphasized his desire to end hostilities. For the first time, the faint light at the end of the tunnel was visible, though clouded by the thorny issue of territorial concessions, an obstacle Kyiv was unlikely to accept without resistance. Yet even here, technical working groups from the United States, Russia, and Ukraine began meeting, searching for formulas of compromise. Trump, true to his transactional style, raised the stakes. If progress failed, he would not hesitate to impose crushing economic measures on both Moscow and Kyiv. His message was blunt: this conflict could no longer be framed in absolutes of victim and aggressor. Peace had to be forced if it would not emerge naturally. For Europe, this was a moment of reckoning. The continent could no longer rely on narratives alone. It had to confront the consequences of its choices. For Ukraine, the halo of unquestioned victimhood was gone. And for Russia, the chance to shift from pariah to negotiator offered a path back into relevance. Whether this fragile balance leads to resolution or deeper chaos will depend on what leaders dare to admit and what citizens are willing to endure. The world now waits, with bated breath, to see if 2025 will be remembered as the year of endless accusations, or as the year when the guns finally fell silent across the fields of Eastern Europe.